Hello, welcome to the conversation in News Central Television. This is the program where we bring you up to speed with all the political happenings on the African continent. I am Benga Aboroa.
And I'm Rita Omodia. Now, on today's edition of the conversation, we will be looking at political situations in Kenya, where the country's opposition has announced the resumption of anti-government protests from 2nd May, nearly 3 weeks after suspending rallies to take part in a dialogue with authorities.
Meanwhile, as the war in Sudan continues to rage on, several countries, including the United Kingdom and the United States of America, are making efforts to evacuate their citizens and diplomats from the war-torn region in complex and rapid evacuation operations. It's sad that 1 week after the situation in Sudan has not improved. But let me first start by wishing you happy Salah, my dear sister, my dear colleague.
I wish you happy Salah. I don't know, did you get any meat during the Salah? Because I didn't get any.
It's not the Salah where they
at least those that shared meat.
No, you know, this is the one that don't share meat is coming.
Okay, well, so I'm hoping for that time that we'll get more meat. But anyways, you know, despite the Eid al-Fitr celebration, we're expecting that Sudan, being at least a Muslim country, would, suspend, have a cessation of hostilities. But no, we saw the two sides all raging on, hospitals, people dying, and now we're seeing evacuation of foreign nationals. But unfortunately, Nigeria is finding it quite hard.
Yes, and I believe it's because the countries that have been able to move their citizens from the airport. It's a very complex operation. They have it with the supervision of their military. They have boots on ground to help prevent the RSF or the army, to stop them from shooting, from preventing the citizens from getting into the crossfire. I think Nigeria has a different technique. They want them to go by road.
How many days will it take them by road?
The interesting thing about the geography of Sudan is Khartoum is right smack in the middle, so it's going to take quite a long time, and I don't know how they want to do it to get to the border regions. Other people have been going to Port Sudan and then they go by ferry or vessels to take them to the final destination. But I just hope common sense prevails on these two warring generals and this senseless war.
You know, they say common sense is not common, but we do hoping that, for the people, let them just suspend all this fighting going on and even allow for the evacuation of the people, and they can carry their fight to themselves, not that people will be affected by their own quarrels, because it seems like citizens are the ones suffering from it all.
Because it's just personal between Hemeti and Burhan. But let's start with our major discussion, our first topic of discussion today that takes us to Kenya. Nearly 3 weeks after suspending rallies, Kenya's Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition says it will resume anti-government protests from the 2nd of May. Protests led by opposition leader Raila Odinga against the government began in March over claims the presidential vote in August had been rigged and government's failure to tackle the soaring cost of living. 3 people died, with businesses and properties vandalized.
Now, in early April, Odinga halted protests in response to Ruto's call for dialogue, but discrepancies mounted over the manner of dialogue. While Ruto insists on bipartisan parliamentary discussions, Odinga says dialogue should also involve those outside the parliament. The opposition had earlier warned protests would resume if insufficient progress was made in the talks. Now, join us for this conversation, we have Honorable Maina Karobia, a Member of Parliament, East African Legislative Assembly, EALA, and we also have Tele Nzomo, Programs Officer Siasa Place, both joining us from Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on the conversation.
Thank you.
I'm going to be going to you, Honorable Karobia, and we want to know some of the concerns, because I know that earlier on, Raila Odinga said that if the discussions were not successful or fruitful, then it might lead to the resumption of the protest. Now, they're saying May 2nd, they would resume protests. So what are some of the concerns of the Azimio la Umoja coalition that has led to this resumption of protests for May 2nd?
Thank you for hosting me here at News Central. I must say that I look forward to having a physical interview with your station in future.
We look forward to hosting you.
As it may, I want to say that I don't think Azimio coalition has any concerns. The president was very categorical in regards to how he wants to engage with the opposition, and he said that we are going to engage on constitutional institutions. and that is the parliament. So any discussions that want to be given a national image, let it be dealt with at the parliament level. Because parliamentarians are actually people representatives. I remember when I was here talking to you, I think a month ago, I said that
Honorable Karobia, can you hear us?
Okay, while we try to resolve Honorable Karobia's connection, I would like to bring in Tele into the conversation. Now, Tele, the bipartisan talks to resolve the political crisis enters a crucial stage on Tuesday, April the 25th. What has been the major point of discussion, and has there been any progress so far? And with this latest information that we've heard that the Azimio camp is set to resume demonstrations on the 2nd of May, does it throw a spanner into the works of this parliamentary negotiations? Is it still going to happen, or it will happen alongside the demonstrations? What do we know?
I think the threats of another round of demonstrations is just something that the opposition is using to try and pile pressure on government. I think they feel as though maybe government or the President Ruto's side hasn't necessarily been they feel as though maybe they're not willing to deal with all the issues, especially matters to do with the elections. As you know, I think that Raila Odinga did not necessarily want parliamentary talks. I think he wanted something, as he had mentioned, akin to what we had in 2007, 2008, when we had the Kofi Annan-led process, which was done outside parliament. But President Ruto was very adamant that any talks, any conversations would happen in parliament. I think for Raila, I think he's a little bit worried that maybe he's not getting enough of what he wants. That maybe President Ruto is probably winning in the negotiations. But I think also just time will tell. I think once the process starts, once they come up with a work plan, once they come up with a framework, we expect to hear something from them tomorrow. I think we'll have a better idea of what will happen. I'm not quite sure that the protest will necessarily resume on May. They may resume, they may not resume.
Okay.
But we're not sure.
Okay, thank you so much, Tele. I'd like to bring you back Honorable Karobia. Thank you so much again for joining us. And we're still looking at discussions. I mean, it's going to enter its critical stage tomorrow, 25th of April. We've been having discussions. So can you tell us what has been the resolve so far? What exactly? Because Raila Odinga has put so much things forward. He talked about reconstituting the electoral process and the constitution of the electoral body. So what has been discussed so far?
Really, last week on Friday there was a discussion. Not on Friday, on Wednesday and Thursday there was a meeting of the team, a bipartisan team that was constituted by both teams. They actually met in a Nairobi hotel, and they discussed the modalities of how they are going to go about the bipartisan talks. To a great extent, I want to say that the parliamentarians who are chosen to lead that caucus or that talk, they have tried to their level best, because I've not had them answer each other back in the public rallies, but rather they are having those what we call meetings at the behind the scenes, which I think is a good thing at this stage. But let me say this. Anything that is progressive must be discussed in public or in legitimate and constitutional institutions. In this case, the parliament. Mr. Raila Odinga is wrong when he tries to circumvent and try to run away from matters being discussed in full awareness of the people. And full awareness of the people is having those matters discussed in
Honorable Karobia.
We seem to have some connection issues with Honorable Karobia. We'll get back to you shortly. Tele Nzomo in Nairobi. The Azimio La Umoja coalition has accused the government of failing to bring down the cost of flour, fuel, electricity and school fees. What is the president's stance on these, and do you think these demands are feasible? Looking at Raila Odinga's trajectory in the past, has always had a way of losing elections and then forcing himself into government in form of a power-sharing deal. Do you think this might also be the end game with all this protests and disruptions?
I think, first of all, on the issue of the cost of living, the president has tried to say that he is doing his best to reduce the cost of living. Just last week, he mentioned that the price of flour has come down. I think, as I saw somebody on Twitter saying that only a country in a country like Kenya do we start debating whether the price of flour has come down or it's still at the same place. But the president claims that he is trying his best to reduce. It's not easy. He blames the former administration, which ironically he was also part of, for these issues. But where we are with our economy, it's not something that we're going to deal with in a month or in 2 months. The issue of our economy is very, very serious. We have huge debt. We have huge debt obligations. Just this month, government, delayed in paying civil servant salary. Just today, the Council of Governors has announced that we could see counties shutting down in the next 2 weeks if they don't get their money from Treasury. As far as Raila Odinga, yes, it's very, very possible that Raila is using these protests as a way of getting a foot in government. It's very possible. At this point, it's really, really speculation what he actually wants. Politicians are all about their selfish interests. I don't necessarily believe that he believes that they're going to deal with issues of the economy anytime soon. And also when it comes to matters of the economy, there are other ways in parliament where you can go and bring bills and reduce taxation. So it's very possible that Raila is looking at a way of going into government. Again, it's just speculation. I think only he and his close allies really, really know what he wants.
Sorry to interrupt you, Tele. Does he have the backing of all parliamentarians from the Azimio La Umoja coalition, or is just personal? How effective of a leader is he, and is everybody in the party on board with this program of continuous protest, knowing that the economy doesn't change overnight and these things take time in reality?
Well, I think you can say that he has most of the members of parliament. I think one of the things that we have seen is some of the leaders who are allied to Azimio have actually started shifting positions and actually going to work with government. We have seen some governors saying that they're not going to be supporting these protests, that they're not in support of this protest. So, he has majority of the leaders behind him. But there are some who are leaning towards the government or leaning towards working with the government. So in as far as leadership, I think he still has majority. He still has his allies. His running mate, Martha Karua, with him. Kalonzo Musyoka has still been there. So he still has majority of the leaders behind him.
Okay, now, Tele, aside from selfish interests, possible selfish interests, you talk about the fact that Odinga still has majority of the parliamentarians behind him. So for your own analysis, will it be so wrong to have the discussions outside Parliament? Why is William Ruto insisting that it should be within the Parliament if he has done everything right? What's your own take on that?
I think the feeling is that if it is discussions outside Parliament, then now that is what will lead to maybe some sort of a handshake. As I said, Raila Odinga had mentioned that he wanted he wanted something similar to what we had in 2007 with Kofi Annan. And as you know, after the 2007 talks, we had the Grand Coalition government. Of course, the situation was very different because we were going through the worst post-election violence that we had ever seen in our country. So I feel as though the president worries that if these matters go outside Parliament, then now that would open the door for possible coalition or possible, give Raila an opportunity to get into government, which I think is what he wants to prevent. I think William Ruto has been very, very adamant ever since he won the election that he is not going to work with Raila Odinga in government, and I think he really wants to stick to that. And I think there's also a lot of pressure from some of his allies, especially the hardliners, for them not to be able to work with them.
Thank you, Tele. I'd like to bring back Honourable Karobia into the conversation. Now, Kenya faces plunging local currency and a record drought that has left millions hungry. President William Ruto has not even spent a year in office. Number one, is it too early to judge his economic plans, looking at the back of what he inherited? And what are President Ruto's plans and policies to turn the economy around?
Friend, I don't know whether you have been following the news in Kenya, but the cost of living in Kenya is actually reducing. The cost of a 2 kilogram flour in Kenya has actually reduced by almost 55%. 6 months ago, when President Ruto was coming to power.
And I believe that's sorry to interrupt you, I believe that's the staple food, ugali.
Yes, ugali.
Yes.
So when President William Ruto was coming to power, he made the cost of living, the cost of unga, or the cost of flour in Kenya, costing at 230 shillings. Right now, it is costing 170 shillings. That is a whole, in fact, it is 159, not 170, 170, or 150 shillings, 159 Kenya shillings. That really tells you that the cost of living is coming down. And I think if there is one president who has really helped Kenya in terms of looking at the priority areas, it is President William Ruto. And as a country or as a government, because I come from the ruling party, we have decided that we are not going to be spending subsidies on consumer goods or the consumer chain of the value chain. We are going to put subsidies on the production level, so that we are going to be providing farmers with subsidized fertilizers, subsidized seeds, so that now when we are having, when now we get to the point of harvesting, the cost of these products, the raw materials, will be lower. Unlike in the past, when you would find government or the previous government was putting subsidies on the end product, and putting subsidies on the end product, that means that you are not going to dictate the market per se. Instead, government will be captive of the market, because now market it rises. It means that the subsidies can only try to bring the prices down a little bit. That means that the government will not have control over the market. But in this case, when we are going, as the commitment of the current administration, we are going to subsidize the inputs so that we can be able to control the prices. And that is the kind of strategy we are employing in this cost of living. Also, we have a lot of interventions in terms of our engagement with the development partners. We want to have an engagement where we are not now becoming an overly consumer market, but rather a production market. And we have reached out to various development partners in terms of creating dams. And I've seen the Ministry of Water and Irrigation in Kenya. They have engaged international development partners to help us develop or come up with dams and other irrigation schemes under what you call public-private partnerships, so that we can improve the level of food security in Kenya. In fact, the terminology that we are using in Kenya is food sovereignty. Because if a country is not secure, or if a country is not food sovereign, that country is not independent per se. That's what we are looking at administration.
Okay, thank you so much, Honorable Karobia. Now, you have clearly highlighted a lot of things that President William Ruto is doing to help the economy. And I want to bring Tele into all of this because you're a citizen, you're in Nairobi, Kenya. So first of all, what are some of the other areas you feel that William Ruto has done well, or you feel that he should also put emphasis on in making the economy better? And secondly, we know that the May 2nd protest is confined to only Nairobi, Kenya, which you're in. Can you tell us some of the reasons why you think that they are just confining the protest to just Nairobi?
In another area that the president is doing fantastic
all right, Honorable Karobia, just pause it and hold on a bit. I want Tele to answer this, please.
The question is directed to Tele. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. I can proceed?
Yes, please.
Well, I think right now, as far as why they're confined in Nairobi, I don't think there has been that want or the need from a lot of people to want to participate in some of these protests. I think there's so many challenges that Kenyans are facing, and again, this is something that we have seen over and over again, and I think to some extent we're starting to see a little bit of fatigue. Of course, we have seen protests in Kisumu, in Kisumu, which is a very big Raila Odinga stronghold. But interestingly enough, we haven't seen the same protests in a place like Mombasa, where historically, again, it's been another Raila Odinga stronghold, but this time around, they don't seem to be getting involved. We will see if that will change as time goes on. But I do feel as though there's a sense of fatigue, of always just being part of protests every single time we see an election. And I think that's why we are not seeing it as much outside Nairobi.
Thank you, Tele. Now, Honorable Karobia, as we begin to wrap up this conversation, we do know that these protests have become self-sabotaging because it's disrupts the economy. People can't go about their business, and it's just an endless cycle of disruptions. So what will it take to have fruitful negotiations between both parties, the president and Raila Odinga, so that Kenya can move on and progress, and the president can carry out his plans for the people? Honorable Karobia, are you there?
The discussion that we have had is, or the arrangement that we have as a government and also the opposition, is that discussions will be held at the parliament by the parliamentarians. The president has been very candid and objective in regards to how he wants to engage them, even to the point of giving in on the issue of recruitment of IBC commissioners. Even when we know that we should engage on, or we should look at it from a constitutional point of view, the president has actually given room for the minority side to at least have a say in regards to how we are going to recruit the commissioners in the run-up to the next elections. But be that as it may, the country is not distracted. I don't want to use the word of the protest will have any distraction in regards to the elections. In fact, Kenyans are saying that if it means Raila Odinga going to the streets, let that happen instead of having a handshake that is too expensive to the country than even the protest that we have. Because my brother and my sister, in the previous administration, the cost of dialogue and handshake that happened in 2018 was so expensive to the point that this country was losing 2 billion per day. 2 billion Kenyan shillings. So Kenyans are actually saying that if protest is what is going to satisfy Raila Odinga's political ego, then let that happen. But dialogue in regards to the president and the opposition leader coming together to shake each other's hand, let that not happen, because it is too expensive for the country. We are going to have government officers, government officials who will be running the government unchecked. We want a vibrant and active opposition. even as a person, as a member of parliament from the ruling party, I would want an opposition that is present, an opposition that is active, an opposition that is vibrant. I don't want to have an opposition that is in bed with the government. I want somebody who can check on how I'm running my affairs as a member of parliament. And that is what Ken wants.
Thank you very much, Honourable Maina Karobia, Member of Parliament, East Africa Legislative Assembly, and Tele Nzomo, Programs Officer at Siasa Place, both joining from Nairobi. We do appreciate your insights and your contribution to this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm coming to Nigeria. For this.
We hope to see you. You're welcome.
Okay, thank you.
Mambo.